Hi, it's Saremy. I'm back. It's been a couple of weeks since I've done a Friday sews, and man, I have a bunch of things to share with you. But whew, my project today on my live stream was a little bit drama. Well, first off, do I look different? Do I look different to you? I am now an empty nester. I really never ever thought about that term, but here I am. I'm one of the club. And it's only been a few days, but I'm hanging in there. Everything went really great. So I'm really happy for my daughter, and I'm really excited for her. I loved moving out and exploring the world and being on my own. So I'm pretty excited for her. So that's my personal news. And then as far as like sewing, I actually have a bunch of projects to share, mainly because I was sewing a few things the week I left, and I didn't share them on my Friday sews because they weren't videos out yet. So first off, I finished the chinos for my husband, and they turned out really, really nice. They look really good on him. I'm really excited about them. They were by Wardrobe by Me Patterns. They fit him really nicely. I think I ended up having to ease the waistband across the back waist a little bit. And I think that I'm going to remove that easing so that they fit a little better, because actually what I needed to do is just not ease it and just remove a little bit of the waistband. And since there's a center back seam, that makes it easy. The pockets are a really great length. He likes the length of the pockets of the chinos much more than the cargo shorts, which were a little short. And he was wearing the cargo shorts on our trip and literally lost the key to my car inside the car, because it fell out of his pocket, because it's a little square fob thing, and he didn't have the whole keychain because I have the keys. It's my truck, so he doesn't usually have the keys, and so he was just had the spare, and it fell out, and we can't lock the doors if it's in there. So we realized it'd fallen out of his pocket. So there's that. And he's wearing the cargo shorts, which is always a good sign, right? It's a little too warm for chino pants, but they look amazing on him. The fabric was a great choice, and I'm super pleased with those. After that, I sewed the Reynolds top by Helen's Closet. It turned out really cute. I may have shared about that, and I uploaded a how-to video on how to sew that. And then I also made a bunch of camisoles, knit camisoles without the bra, and I did fold over elastic on two of them, but I kind of really only showed me sewing one of them. I offered a couple of different hem choices, because sometimes the cover stitch can be a little bit tricky, especially when you're new to it. And then I also offered a way to sew it with fabric and no fold over elastic, and I did it different than the instructions. And I used the camisole that was in the Luna Loungewear set by Love Notions. A lot of really great patterns in that whole set. I think I got the set for pretty inexpensive too, I think, because it was on one of their Friday specials. They have like $5 pattern specials every Friday, and so far they've been some really good ones. So, and that's on their newsletter list. And I was able to sew like 4 camisoles that day because I had never sewn the pattern, and honestly I haven't sewn a lot of fold over elastic, but it's a piece of cake, especially with the serger. Made it really fast. But then the fabric version, I actually like wearing the fabric one more because it's softer. It just takes a little bit more of fiddly pinning. I used binder clip, or clover clips, but that one turned out really great, and I love it. And funnily, it matches these pair of underwear I made my husband last year, so now we're kind of matchy, which is kind of funny, So, all right, and then the third video I uploaded last week was another one of my ASMR videos for sewing. So basically, I sew a project without talking, and I did the Reynolds dress by Helen's Closet, and it turned out really beautiful. I even kind of got partway through the process and was like, oh shoot, I didn't check to see how she wanted to sew this hem, and it's mitered, and I had to kind of figure that out on the fly. And I even made a little mistake, and I could recover from that. I think it was great. I loved making that dress. It was so enjoyable. It was just such a pleasure to sew. and wear. And I was able to, make some fit adjustments from the Reynolds top and apply it to this dress, which I made in this linen with a stripe border print at the bottom. So that turned out really great. So this week brings us to my drama. This week I am making the men's utility jacket by Wardrobe by Me Patterns. It's the third pattern this month I'm making for men, and I have one more next week. And I did a lot of work on this pre-live stream. And typically with live streams, I don't do a lot of work. I spend a lot of hours before the live stream getting things ready, getting thumbnails, which are like the graphics before, making sure I have all the materials, making sure I have my pattern printed out, making sure I know which size I'm going to do as far as if I'm making it for someone else. But a lot of times I even select my size on camera. And I do that because it's more of a organic experience, and it's more like as if someone was in their sewing room sewing by themselves. And so I may encounter things that I have to kind of noodle on, and that's what it's all about, right? It's all about like troubleshooting and problem solving. And I think all of us agree that when we see someone problem solving, it is beneficial. It may take longer, but it's beneficial because then we learn and we don't make the same mistakes as them, right? So I did a lot more prep on this utility jacket, mainly because I'm doing a lot of details on it. So, and by that I mean I'm using waterproof fabric, and I am not new to waterproof fabrics. I used to work in the garment industry, in the outerwear industry at a water sportswear manufacturer, and we made waterproof breathable garments and non-breathable garments. So that's something I could talk a lot about. And I didn't use something like that. This year I made the Kelly Anorak, and I made it waterproof, and I used auto wax, right? So this time I'm using waterproof fabric. So I realized I didn't know that it had a lining, this utility jacket, until right before my trip. So I found this beautiful cotton Japanese ripstop that's a stretch cotton ripstop it was a Japanese fabric, and I bought it from Maker's Fabric, who I'm kind of is becoming my go-to for hardware like snaps and things, because they're not sold out of it. And they have such a beautiful selection of fabrics. And so I was kind of looking on their site, and I was like, oh, this stretch ripstop looks great for this other project I'm working on, and maybe for the jacket. And my husband was down. The stretch is not necessary, and with a stretch woven, it really doesn't matter if you use it or not when you don't need it. So I picked that out. So I had to do that little bit of last minute research, get my hardware and stuff. And then while I was researching that, I started to kind of think about, like, maybe I'll look at other options for waterproofing this garment, since I'm not seam taping it and it's lined. What could I do to extend the, or improve upon the waterproofness once I've sewn it? And so I kind of looked at those threads that can, increase the waterproofness of fabric once you're sewing it, if you're using the proper tension, needle size, and all that. There's something about the friction of sewing it. I don't want to say the word friction, but there's something about the act of sewing it that activates it in a way that, promotes the waterproofness of the seam. And so I found this thread from Sailrite, and it wasn't marketed specifically for that, but that is one of the attributes. It's more marketed for lasting longer for outdoor use because of sun and corrosion, maybe salt water, stuff like that. So I got it, and then I did a bunch of tests, and it did great. And then yesterday when I went today, that's today. It's yesterday for you because it's Friday. I went to sew it. I found that I just couldn't sustain sewing it with using it in my bobbin. And now a lot of us who have done things like jeans or other projects where you use a heavier weight top stitch thread or decorative, we all know that using that in the bobbin is almost impossible. And so I knew that. It wasn't like it was kind of going into it blind. But I did work on it. I put a size 18 needle in my machine. I calibrated the tension. I even did a couple of crafty things with the threading of my machine to kind of lessen the tension in one area, but make sure it stayed in the tension discs in another area. I noticed my thread snip in my machine wasn't working, so I knew probably can't use my automatic thread cutter. And it seemed good, you know, like I sewed seam, I top stitched it, I sprayed it with water, let it sit, nothing seeped through. I thought great. But then when I went to sew it today, I just had so much drama with it. The tension wasn't quite right. I had to reset the tension. Then I noticed it had popped out of my tension disc, so it wasn't even in there. Oh man! And then I made a mistake where it got caught inside my machine. I didn't know what it was caught on. It was just like a little piece of thread, and I just couldn't grab it. And then I don't know. All of a sudden was like, oh, you know, when you're having this issue, like what had gotten me into that pickle of getting this little thread caught, which was basically starting at the beginning of a seam. And you know how sometimes your machine doesn't start when you start at the seam because it's too thick or your feed dogs aren't grabbing it, and it kind of just gets that big ball of thread and you get stuck there and you're getting stuck to the underside of your, you know, your throat plate. I saw that happening. That's why I stopped immediately. But then I had this one little thread under there. And so then while I was there, I was like, oh, you know, there is ways to prevent this. I just never do it. And a lot of really, you know, more on top of it sewists are really clever, and they always butt up fabric against the back of it, that scrap fabric, and then start sewing. A lot of us know that trick. I never use it. And of course, I'm like, oh, you know, there's this thing you could do. And I start to demonstrate it. I didn't have my bobbin in my machine. So that's the second time ever live on camera I started sewing without the bobbin in my machine. Probably the second time ever I've cussed on live on camera too. And so that just was, I mean, at that point I'm just kind of laughing, you know, like most people would be like, okay, bye, I'm crawling under a rock. I did tell people just to turn off the stream, I think, at one point. But that is just sometimes how it goes, you know. And I got everything going, and I was like, you know what? This is it. I think that using this as the bobbin, I was just hoping for way too much. So I put in regular bobbin thread, and then we did another test of the waterproofness. Seems to be pretty good. I didn't notice anything seeping through. So, you know, it's not a full-time outdoor raincoat. There's not even a hood. It's just something to give my husband more 3-season wearability when he's working outside chopping wood and stuff. Maybe he doesn't have to have a hood on or whatever, right? 'Cause it's pretty hot where we live. So, you know, I'm not going to sweat it. So then what happened? So basically, the other thing I learned with working with this fabric is I did a test of fusing some cotton woven fusible interfacing to it. This fabric definitely needs some interfacing in it, I've found. I feel like it does. It probably doesn't have to, but I think it would benefit from it. So I did that, and then I did a waterproof test on it, and it definitely decreased the waterproof. I feel like I was feeling some water seep through, and then add to the fact that the interfacing is cotton, you know. So I decided just to use regular fabric as the interfacing inside. But it's still like the tension doesn't look great, and this also means that I can't iron as I go when I sew. So the first, you know, steps of this jacket are sewing pocket flaps and pleated pockets, box pleat pockets. You do a lot of ironing with those steps. And I know I'm a little cavalier. I don't pin often, but I use a couple of pins when I put a top pocket on. I always put a couple in the middle of the pocket. So I had to do all this really fussy sewing without ironing. So basically I spent like an hour and a half sewing pockets today and dealing with thread. And then I graduated from the front, went to the back, and then I sewed the center back panel upside down. And you know, I knew I did it when I was doing it because I said something. I was like, wait a minute, this looks upside down. And I was like, no, I picked that piece up. No, it was upside down. I had enough fabric. Thank goodness I had a lot of extra fabric. I just recut that out and resewed it because I'm not going to mess around with having all those needle holes in that fabric. So this is where I'm at now. Obviously, it's a men's jacket, so it's not going to work too well on my dress form. So this side has just a flat pocket, and then there's, you know, these pleated pockets with flaps on the lower part, and then one chest pocket has a pleated pocket as well. It's kind of dark, sorry about that. But it does look pretty good. I'll show you on this overhead camera as well. All right, so you can see that one chest pocket has the flap and one doesn't, and then the lower part both have flat pockets. It also has a casing, and like I said, I omitted that. And the back has some nice seaming, and it would normally have the casing, but this one won't. And then it has a yoke as well, 2-piece sleeve with a cuff, and only the front and back are lined, so it's pretty simple lining procedure. And then it has a collar, no hood, so it's pretty simple that way as well. So it does have a zipper and a flap and everything, and it's with a facing, so it's sewn directly to the lining. So I think it's pretty straightforward. Once I can get everything behaving and no hiccups with thread and, you know, sewing it without ironing it. But I think all in all, it's going to be really great. And it'll be a nice lightweight raincoat, but kind of classy too. So yeah. All right, and so on my trip, I also picked up a souvenir of sorts, which is this bottle, and it's a spray bottle, and look at how cute it is. Like, that's what sewists do, right? When they go on vacation, they get sewing souvenirs. The color is a little better in the face cam. It's a little yellow up here because I have it so overexposed because of the jacket. And then a couple of the other things that I've received in the mail are kind of sewing related. I finally got some magic pins. I've always wanted to try these. I've been looking for better pins for a while. I don't use pins a lot, but I still want some nice ones. And the quilting pins I've been getting, they're starting to just bend. So the quality's gone down with those, just like everything does eventually, right? These are pretty short. They're probably half the length of what I usually use, but they're stout. They're 0.6 millimeter. And then I also got the double style just to try them out. It's a little lighter weight, 0.5 millimeter for the pin part, but it's got 2 prongs. You can see it here in the fabric. Sorry, it's a little bright, huh? But I'm kind of excited. I can't even use it on my first project because it's a raincoat, but I will. I will say the whole like comes in a designer case. The case is pretty fiddly. I kind of feel like it needs to be more to grab onto when I open and close it, and I feel like the pins are going to go flying. But that's okay. I'm going to put them on my pin cushion. It'll be fine. So lastly, this is probably not very interesting to most folks except for anyone else who's sewing or recording sewing videos. I thought you might be interested in this because until I moved to this space, I never had this issue where my cameras vibrate, and it's because I have a really, really cushy carpet pad underneath my rugs. And so I got some vibration pads, and so I'm testing them out. So I got a couple of big ones. They can get really expensive, so I really shopped around. And I got, this came in a 4-pack of these really big ones, and I got this to fit under my serger and one under my cover stitch machine, and I have 2 left over. It's got an adhesive back as well. You can't really see. I won't really need that part of it. And then I also, which I'm already using, these little 4-inch squares. I would say they're about 4-inch squares. They're much stouter. It's like they have a corrugated rubber top and bottom, and then in between those 2 layers is a foam, so it's like a sandwich. They're pretty stout. I tried them under my machine, and that didn't make much of a difference, and I'm kind of glad it didn't because it raised my machine up even higher. And then instead I put them under just these cameras, the ones that I've been using in this video today, which it doesn't matter for this video because I'm not sewing. But what was happening was the floor was so cushy, it was transferring the vibrations to the camera. Or it was the machine moving a little bit. Like your machine's gonna move a little bit. It's vibrating, right? It's a motor, but not like this. This was getting kind of like, okay, this is distracting for me. No one complains about it, but I notice it. So, and this is a pretty affordable way to kind of up the quality. So I thought I'd pass that along. And someone today in my chat actually asked me, hey, did you already put those vibration pads under your machine or your cameras? And I said, I have. Why? Do you notice it or do you not notice it? And they're like, I did notice it. So that's really great. And what I did was I recorded before putting them in and after putting them in. And I made sure that everything here on the surface was exactly the same so I could tell. And then I could compare the 2. So putting them, I only have them under these cameras here. And then these cameras over here are not on vibration pads, and they're over the serger and cover stitch. So those machines are a little further away, but they still vibrate, and I feel like it's the machine vibrating more than the camera. So it's kind of a part diagnosing and part kind of experimenting. So I just thought I'd share that if anyone else is kind of struggling with that. I don't see anyone else talk about it. So I think that's everything for me. I guess more like what's going on in my life personally, like as far as like what I'm up to. I finished the Furies of Calderon book and I really like that. And then I started Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, which is kind of in that Six of Crows world. And so far I'm liking it. And yeah, I mean, things are a little crazy at my house because we just got home. We both had to go to work right away the next day. And we're both taking turns sleeping in my daughter's cottage because she had a feral cat she was adopting. And it finally worked, but he's not into our house yet. And her cottage was kind of bare bones. Like, it wasn't like a full-on, like, standalone house. So we're trading off sleeping in the cottage and he's sleeping with us in there. So it's kind of just adding a whole layer. Haven't seen George the deer in a while. Hopefully he's doing okay. But you just never know with that guy. He could be sleeping in our yard all day and we wouldn't even notice. He's that stealthy. So still tons of wildlife, but at least we had a little break being on our trip. So, all right, that's it for me. I hope this finds you well. And if you're in one of those fire-prone areas or flooding or storm-prone areas, I hope you're safe. I hope your family is safe. And yeah, we're really close to the Big Dixie Fire here. It's about 15 miles away, but we're doing fine. And it's just smoky here so far. The firefighters and their crews are doing just such an amazing job keeping everybody safe. I think like this is really hit us hard this year, the fire season, and they are doing just an amazing job. So I really appreciate that. I can't say that enough, right? So I hope there's no sewing drama in your life, and maybe I'll see you next week. Happy sewing.